My name's Vanessa. I'm the Student Wellbeing Coordinator here at Middlesex. So I'm in charge of sort of proactive health initiatives, events and information, and ensuring that our students have all the information and resources they need to look after themselves through their time at university. So today's session is all going to be about your wellbeing and specifically the idea of coming to university, setting expectations and the transition period really of coming to university, what it's like and how you can best prepare. So welcome, and fingers crossed my Wi-Fi plays along now as we try and go through the presentation. We're going to sort of start with a bit of a touch base to see how you're feeling about coming to university, just so I can get a sense check of how you're doing, any thoughts and feelings you have about the transition process and starting university generally. We'll cover a bit about language, so what we mean even by the term wellbeing, people's different understanding of wellbeing and health and mental health. We'll cover change and transition, what can make it difficult and how we can make it a little bit easier on ourselves. And of course that includes self-care. And at the end, we're going to touch on support services, so ways in which we as an institution can support your health and wellbeing. And I, of course, will leave all my contact details at the end so that you can contact me after this session today if you've got any questions or queries that we haven't covered. So a little bit about housekeeping. Please do pop a little virtual hands up if you did want to chat. I don't think we have the chat function today, but we've got the Q&A and my colleague Jack is here kindly fielding that for me. So if you've got any questions, please pop it in the Q&A and I can answer those afterwards and get back to you. Jack and his colleagues will send around a copy of the slides and the session, so don't worry too much about sort of trying to take in everything. If it's quite a busy slide, you will get a copy afterwards. And throughout, I've got some opportunities for you to get involved, and that will include going off to a website called menti.com, and you can do that on your phone, laptop, whatever device you're tuning in from today. And that's a really great way for you to get involved anonymously. So if you don't feel comfortable, sort of engaging directly with the session, you can use Menti, and as I say, it's completely anonymous. So that's actually how we're going to start today, with a bit of a touch base to see how you are feeling about coming to university or the idea of starting university. It may be that you're feeling quite excited, maybe that you're really looking forward to it, maybe you've decided on Middlesex, maybe you've got a few different contenders. It could be though that you're feeling a bit anxious, a bit uncertain about what the new academic year might look like, particularly in light of COVID and sort of what's going on in the world, or you could be anywhere in between, and that's completely fine. So what I'd like you to do is head over to www.menti.com, and when you get there, you should see that it asks you to type in a code, and that's where I'd like you to type in 197-13396, and you'll be able to engage with the session there. So I'm going to head over there now, and this is what you should be seeing when it loads. So as I said, all thoughts and sort of feelings are welcome. There's really no right or wrong way to be feeling about coming to university. Hopefully this will be a nice exercise for you to see that you're not alone in feeling a particular way about coming to university, and you'll see that others are sort of feeling the same sorts of things as you are. So there at the top of the screen you can see the code. You can see a few of you have started to pop in your thoughts and feelings. So we've got excited, lots of uncertainty, a bit conflicted, afraid, hopeful, scared, nervous, anxious, terrified, daunted, worried, privileged. Thank you everybody who's contributed so far. I'll give you a couple more moments to find your way there if you haven't quite got there yet. So as you can see at the moment, a lot of us are feeling a little bit worried and anxious about the idea of coming to university, what it may look like. I think whoever's popped in a lot of uncertainty They've probably summarised what a lot of us are feeling about the new academic year, what it may look like, and sort of how we'll be led, obviously, by the government's response around COVID. So I'll just give you a couple more moments in case anybody else wants to contribute there. It's nice to see a few of you feeling hopeful and excited as well. So a real mixed bag. Thank you, everybody. We will head back over now to the presentation. I'll just give that a moment to load. So as you can see, it's a bit of a mixed bag with how we're all feeling about coming to university. And so hopefully that was reassuring. Oftentimes when we think about coming to university, we think of feeling hugely excited and really confident. And as we've seen, actually a lot of people often feel a little bit worried and sort of a bit concerned about things like making friends, settling in, finding our way around. So I hope you know that you're not alone if you're feeling that way, and hopefully after the session today, some of your worries will be eased a little bit. So we've had a rough year and a half, haven't we? Through times, you know, it may have seemed that there hasn't been much going on. You may have been feeling quite held back in terms of what you were able to do at particular times. You may have felt that you haven't had much routine. You may have felt that your routines have been completely disrupted. So if you've come from a college or a sixth form environment or some other form of education, that will have been disrupted and your routines will have been sort of thrown into disarray. If you've been working, I'm sure your work patterns have been disrupted in some way or another, or you've had to adapt. There may have been times when you felt a bit low, a bit hopeless about what's going on in the world. And of course, there's been so much going on, and we've been bombarded with news updates all the time. And that takes a toll on our well-being. All of which goes to say that we need to be extra mindful of our health and our well-being when we are thinking about doing something like starting a university course, which is a big moment in our lives. And when we come from a time when we've had to, when there's been a lot going on and times have been harder, we need to pay extra attention to our well-being to help ourselves remain well. And that's what this little diagram here in the corner is showing with the scales. When times are great and when you know, when we don't have too many pressures on us, we don't have to pay as much attention to our health and our well-being to stay well. Whereas when we've come off the back of the year and a bit that we have just come off of, we need to pay extra attention to our health and well-being and put extra effort in to try and keep ourselves as well as possible. So when we think about coming to university, it may be the case that, as I said, you're coming from sixth form or college type education. It may be that you've had a break in education and you've been working and you're returning. Either way, it's a big transition and it's a big change in life to start a university course. And this is a model here called the W curve. Hopefully you can see why it's called the W curve. And it's just a way of us showing that actually change is hard and transitions can be difficult. So often when we start university, we're in what they call this honeymoon phase, where you're meeting lots of new people. Obviously, before COVID, you would have had a very active freshers experience. And obviously last year, through the lockdown, that had to be modified a bit. But you're in this phase where you get to meet lots of new people, you're having a great time, you're obviously very excited because you're embarking on this new change. You may be away from home for the first time. However, what tends to happen is there's a bit of a cultural shock. So particularly if you are an international student, if you are away from home for the first time, or if generally your circumstances have had to change a little bit, there is a bit of a shock as the reality of university sets in. And that's because it's a difficult course. You know, typically if you're going to university, it's going to be the hardest type of study that you've done so far in your life, and that can come as a shock. And typically around this time, you know, you'll be getting your first assignments and there'll be first mentions of things like exams and deadlines. But then, of course, you're resilient and you tend to adjust. So you have this kind of little initial adjustment period, and you're sort of heading back up to that honeymoon phase, and you're managing to cope, and you're feeling quite good about things. And around this time is sort of the winter break, and that's where you tend to go home again to family and friends. And when you return in January is when we see a bit of this mental isolation. And that's because it's January, the weather isn't very good, you've had a bit of time at home to spend with friends and family, or home friends and family. And often we find that students kind of have a bit of a sort of a conflict about where they feel they want to go in their lives. And sometimes homesickness can kind of kick in a little bit again in this second phase. Of course, after that, either through your own coping strategies or with a bit of support, you do integrate, and you do, of course, get on with university life, and you accept the changes that have happened, and you move onwards. But this is a really important model to bear in mind, because often when we are told about university in sixth form or college, or maybe in a different phase of life where you've come from, university is sold as the best time of your life. And of course we hope it will be the best time of your lives, but that isn't to say that it won't be difficult at times. By definition, you're going to be studying a course which is rigorous, and not everybody is able to go to university, so it will be difficult at times, and it's important that we're aware of this so that we set our expectations right, because what we wouldn't want to do is for you to start university thinking it's going to be smooth sailing all the time, and you're not going to have any challenges, because you will have some challenges along the way. The key is just ensuring that you have the skills in place and that you are resilient enough to cope with those challenges. So I've linked a couple of resources here from Student Minds. So Student Minds are a great resource for students. So if you don't know them yet, check them out. You can just Google them. And two of these resources are the Transitions Guide and the Know Before You Go Guide. So I would really suggest after this session, once the slides are sent round, you have a little look through those guides. They tell you a lot more about how to manage transition and change, and they tell you a lot more about kind of stuff it would be helpful to know before arriving at university. And it's a lot about this kind of setting expectations and making sure that you are prepared for what's coming. So I've kind of mentioned the word well-being a couple of times. What even is well-being though? And this is a bit of an open question. There is no one right definition of well-being. What is useful for my well-being may be different to what's useful for your well-being. Having said that, in general, there are some sort of key themes that tend to sort of impact on people's well-being. And that is things like how you're doing emotionally, your mental health, how you are financially, vocational and work-wise, your social skills and what's going on in your personal relationships, your physical health, your environment, so where you live and where you study and work, and your spiritual well-being. Now, obviously for students, there may be slightly different things which have more bearing for you. So obviously your academic achievement is going to play a key part in your well-being. You will not be able to thrive and feel that you are doing as well as you possibly can if you are struggling with your academic achievement. Equally, your mental health is very, very important to your well-being. And if things are not going as well as you would like in terms of your mental health, that of course will have a knock-on effect on your well-being. The definition that I really like though is the one here I've popped at the top from the World Health Organization, which actually talks about health. So health being the state of complete physical, mental and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And I really like the second part here where it says not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. I think often we fall into the trap of thinking that as long as we're not ill, we're well. Whereas actually the World Health Organization here flipped it a little bit, and they've said actually well-being and health is more about thriving rather than just surviving. So that's the definition I'd like you to keep in mind as we go through. So self-care. Self-care is obviously critical to your well-being and keeping yourself well. But when we tend to think of self-care, the first things that may jump into mind are my little meditating person here. So you may be sort of thinking yoga and maybe listening to music, drinking green tea. I think there's a little picture of a holiday there. And yes, all these things can form self-care. But actually what I'd like you to be thinking about before you even come to university is the crux of the problem. So, for example, if this were a student here and this student was really behind with their modules and their coursework, doing yoga could help in terms of their well-being for sure. But actually the crux of the problem here is their academic achievement and ensuring that they've got the resources and the skills to be able to catch up with their course. And unless that situation is resolved, yoga is only going to be like a plaster on a wound. You know, it's not going to support the person to fully overcome the problem. So when we talk about self-care, yes, it could be these quick fix and sort of quite simple things, you know, yoga, music, having a lit candle there, going on a walk. But it could also be more complex things like setting boundaries. It could be saying no, it could be ensuring that you have a really solid routine. It could be recognizing toxic relationships, prioritizing sleep, switching off social media, getting outside. So it's an important distinction, and self-care will be different for everybody, of course. There's not one size fits all. But I'd like you to be really thinking about you know, how you can be looking after yourself at this point and when you come along to university, whether it's Middlesex or a different university, and what some challenges you think that you may find in terms of practicing your self-care and how you can manage those challenges. So maybe if you're a student who's just finishing sixth form or college, you may be thinking, you know, great, I don't need to be sort of worrying too much about actively looking after myself and getting into these healthy self-care routines. I would be saying back to you, for sure, you know, have a break, reward yourself after your exams and your hard work, but start thinking about how you're going to be looking after yourself when you do go to university and what may get in the way of that, and then in turn how you can reprioritize your self-care. So this is a really simple way for you to be thinking about self-care habit building. So this is an action plan, because what I don't want out of this session is for you to be attending, to sit here, to listen to me and think, yeah, Vanessa, that all sounds great, and then switch the webinar off when we finish and don't change anything about your life. What I really want you to be able to do is to leave today and to think, okay, there's something here that I want to do and change to be better looking after myself and working on my well-being ahead of coming to university. So this is a simple way of doing that. It's about picking one thing that you want to build into your daily routine, and ensuring that you set a goal that is SMART. So you may have heard of this before. It's about figuring out something that is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant or realistic, and time-based. For example, if I were thinking to myself, right, I'm coming to university this year and I really want to prioritise my physical health, so I want to build some kind of physical health goal. For me, that could be something like, I want to go for a walk every day. How can I make that goal SMART? Well, it's specific because I've already said it's going to be a walk and it's going to be every day. Measurable, okay, so I could say it's going to be a 30-minute walk every day. Is that achievable for me in terms of my physical health? For me personally, yes, at the moment that would be realistic for me. Is it relevant? Is that going to help me with my overall well-being when I come to university? Yeah, it would be for me, because I would say to myself, I always feel better after I've gone for a walk. And is it time-based? Okay, we can make it time-based by saying, I'm going to do this for a month and then review to see how I'm feeling. So when we set these kinds of self-care habits and goals, it's really important to plan. So goals are a lot easier to achieve when we plan and when we make ourselves accountable. So I could very easily mumble something to myself about, oh yes, I'll make sure I go for a walk most days of the week. if I don't make myself accountable for that and plan it in and schedule it into my day, I'm going to be making excuses for that. And I will make excuses for that because setting self-care habits and getting into habits is difficult. And humans like the easy way out, and we will always try and make excuses, particularly for ourselves. So typically we are a lot better at looking after other people than we are ourselves. So if you've got caring responsibilities, if you're juggling lots of responsibilities, part-time work, studying, caring for somebody, it's most likely that you will prioritise those things over prioritising your self-care goal. So that's why we want to try and plan it into our days as much as possible. So for the walking example that I gave, that could be, right, I'm going to go for a walk every lunchtime at 1 o'clock, and that's going to be a great way for me to look after my health, come back from my walk feeling a lot calmer, a lot more in control of my day. In turn, I'm going to be better at my job that day. I'm going to be better at caring for the people I need to care for because I'm going to be feeling more relaxed. And that's how we see progress. And then it's about practicing it, right? So trying to stick to a routine. We've popped here for the next 21 consecutive days, but some research shows that habits can actually take about 6 weeks to form. So see how you go. The main thing is being kind to yourself. So if something doesn't work quite right, if you miss a day, for whatever reason you couldn't get out on your walk or whatever your goal is, don't be too hard on yourself. Use it as motivation, try and learn from it, and try and pick up again and continue the next day. So the reason we talk about setting these kind of habits now is because, like I said, habits take a long time to form, and the sooner you can get into these kind of habits, the better equipped you're going to be to manage the change period and the transition of starting a university course. So it's about equipping yourself with the skills and therefore the resilience to manage that tricky transition period. So building habits, being accountable for your habits and tracking them and tweaking them if they're not quite right for you. And yeah, I'd really reiterate the point about being kind to yourself if something isn't working perfectly for you. So we've talked a little bit about sort of self-care, and I've given an example of going for a walk. But what would be really nice if you could pop in the Q&A some of your thoughts, some of the things you maybe do for self-care, or maybe something that you think that you might like to try and do for self-care. Share your thoughts in the Q&A while I go on to the next slide, and then perhaps we can read some of them out at the end, or maybe we can share some of the comments when we send the slides around, and we can all learn a little bit from each other. Because like I said at the beginning, self-care is completely different for all of us. And while my walking example may work for me, for you that may not work at all, and actually your self-care may be something completely different. So pop those in the Q&A and we'll get to those at the end. So I wanted to touch on a few common themes when we think about routine and self-care. So time management and study. This is a really important skill and habit to get into to ensure that you'll be able to thrive when you come to university. So hopefully you can see my slightly blurry diagram here. Basically talks about stressing about exams, avoiding study, forgetting to study, telling people I need to study, planning to study, and then this little snippet here about actually studying. So what I'd like you to think back on is what your current study routine looks like, or if you've just finished your exams, what did it look like? Or if you've had a bit of a break in your education, thinking back to when you did your last exams, how did they go and how did you prepare for them? And this again is all about thinking ahead to the new academic year and thinking about how you can best prepare yourself. So if you've had a bit of a break in education, you may be thinking, I don't know how to study, I don't know what works best for me, and that's okay. Again, you have this whole period from now right and through to the new academic year to figure out that about yourself. So I would recommend that you do a bit of exploring online, try some different study methods, see what works for you. and see how effective you are at sticking to those different methods that you try. So again, there are some sort of key methods and key tips and tricks that work for some people, but it is quite personal. So again, what works for me may be different to what works for you when it comes to managing your time and ensuring you study. And again, what I would get you to think about here is where you put yourself and your priorities and your self-care. So again, if you've got a lot on your plate at the minute, if you're juggling responsibilities, work, commuting, studying, caring responsibilities, you may find what happens is that your time gets absorbed by all of these things and studying goes to the bottom of the list. It's completely understandable that that would happen, of course, but it's about trying to slowly but surely build in time every single day, or however often you think you should be studying, and prioritising that time for yourself. Because actually at university, making sure that you have that time to study and do your work is part of your self-care. Because if you don't do that, you'll find yourself start to fall behind, which will only increase your stress levels, which of course we know is really bad for our well-being. So studying and managing your time effectively is really self-care. So some of those key tips and tricks that I talked about, planning is so important. So as soon as you decide on what university you're going to, you get your timetable, have a look at it and see where you're going to be scheduling in your study time, and make sure you prioritise it. Persistence, so tackling procrastination, that really is the enemy of students, isn't it? Procrastination. If you do decide to come to Middlesex, we've got a fantastic app we partner with called Fika. Fika are a mental fitness app, and Middlesex staff and students can access the app exclusively for free. And there's a fantastic section in the app all about procrastination, overcoming procrastination, how to focus, and a lot of our students and staff have found that really helpful. One of my favourites is called the Pomodoro technique. If you Google it, you'll see pictures of tomatoes come up. It's also called the tomato timer technique. I think as Pomodoro means tomato in Italian. If anyone knows Italian, you'll have to write it in the Q&A. Let me know if I got that right or wrong. But basically, this is a study technique which gets you studying in short chunks. So, for example, if I knew I had an assignment to write, I could decide to sit here at my desk and try and write it in 5 hours. But that 5 hours isn't going to be a very effective use of my time if I've got children coming in and out, if my phone's going off, if I'm looking out the window and kind of, procrastinating. Actually, what's going to be a lot more effective for me is if I set a timer for a short amount of time, usually 20 to 25 minutes. And for those 20 to 25 minutes, I focus exclusively on my studies. That means my phone is off or it's on airplane mode, the door is shut, people I live with know to leave me alone for those 20 to 25 minutes where possible, and I have that time just to exclusively focus. So partnering up, some people find it helpful to study with other people and to share ideas and share thoughts. Again, praising yourself, being kind to yourself. Maybe one day you managed to do 20 minutes of study, and you were aiming for 2 hours. Well, you did 20 minutes and that's better than nothing. And like we said, find what works for you. It is sort of trial and error, particularly if you've had a bit of a break in your studies. So, just explore a few different methods and see what works for you. It may be, if you're on quite a creative course, that you like to sort of add some sort of creative elements into your study. For me personally, that wouldn't work. I prefer just kind of a timer approach and switching off all distractions. But again, see what works for you. Again, it's all part of your self-care. And then I really wanted to talk about sleeping and the importance of sleep, because again, when we think about going to university and we think about sort of freshers and meeting new people, there's a real opportunity there to let your routine slide. And that's normal. There's nothing really wrong with that. But what I want to remind you of is that it's really important, more often than not, to have a routine. And having a good sleep routine is one of the best things that you can be doing to look after yourself and to get into a good routine before you come to university. So when we say making sure you get good sleep, how do we do that? Well, try and stick to a schedule. So consistent going to bed and waking up times. So not laying in all the time on the weekends and staying up really late in the week. We often forget that actually as adults, we do need some kind of routine to get to sleep. When you think of sort of putting a baby or a toddler or a child to bed, you take them off for a bath, you maybe give them a bedtime story, you have the lights all dimmed, it's very relaxing. Whereas sort of when you think of adults sort of going to sleep, it's often kind of, you're cooking dinner, you're doing the washing up, maybe you watch something on TV, you're on your phone, and then you expect yourself to be able to go to sleep straight away. If it happens for you, you're very lucky. I'm very jealous of you. For most of us, we do need some time to wind down and to allow our bodies to go to sleep. Again, it's completely personal. It could be a technology detox, so it could be saying to yourself, well, I'm not going to go on my phone for 2 hours before bed. Or if I do, I'm going to make sure I have the blue light filter on to at least give your eyes and your brain a bit of a break. It could be journaling, it could be having a hot bath, having a cup of tea or something. Again, find what works for you and prioritise it. And again, the sooner you can get into that routine, the better. So try not to spend all summer staying up late and not getting up early in the morning if you know that you're going to have 9 a.m. lectures, for example. You want to start to get into that routine before you go to university so that it isn't that much of a shock to the system when you do start and if you do have that 9 o'clock lecture. It's obviously a calm and comfortable sleep environment, so making sure that you don't have too many distractions. Temperature is really important when you're sleeping, making sure it's nice and dark, and again, the experts will tell you not to have your phone with you in the bedroom. So that's something to think about. And on the flip side, of course, a morning routine. So, what does your morning typically look like? Again, if you've just finished exams and you're having a bit of a break and sort of enjoying life again after exams, of course, that's completely fine. Maybe you're having some lions in the morning. But again, think forward to the new academic year and think about what time you're going to be needing to get up and everything that you need to schedule in around that. So obviously, if you have a commute, if you have little people you need to be getting off to school, or if you've got other caregiving responsibilities which you need to take care of before going to university, get thinking about that. Think about your morning routine and think about how you can still prioritise your self-care and your health as well as looking after the people around you. So we can't talk about self-care without also talking about support seeking. As a society, we can be a little bit reluctant to ask for help. We could argue it's sort of cultural. We could argue it's there's a bit of stigma around asking for help. But really, whether you decide to come to Middlesex or if you go to a different university, it's really, really important that you know that every university will have a fantastic support structure in place to help you out. So, for example, on the previous slides, we were talking about studying and study support and trying to figure out how you can best study. Here at Middlesex, for example, we have a learning enhancement team who their main job is specifically to support students with studying. So, for example, if you've been out of education for a while and your first assignment is an essay and you don't know how to reference, we have a team specifically in place who can help you learn how to reference. Equally, if you are on a more mathematical course, let's say, and you have some statistics you need to do and you're not sure how to do it and you're struggling to get into a sort of a study routine, again, the team can help you. They'll support you with numeracy as well. And can sort of talk to you about different ways you can try and get into that study routine. Equally, we've got student learning assistants, they're called. So students who've already done the course that you're about to start, they've done really well on the course and they can help you if you have any problems. And that's just a couple of examples. A little bit later on, I'll go on and sort of talk about some of the other support teams that we have in place. But really the take home here is that if you need support, it's really, really important to ask. That in itself is a skill, a self-care skill. is learning to ask for help when we need it. And as I've put here, you know, sometimes we can feel a bit reluctant to ask for help, but really we shouldn't kind of expect to do everything alone. Life is all about connections and, you know, compassion, helping each other and asking for help, of course, when we need it. But how is asking for help at university different? So if you've come from that sixth form or college environment, you'll find that university feels quite different, because at university you are really expected to be independent. And when it comes to support seeking, at college or sixth form, typically you'll have found that you'll have been sort of checked in with quite a lot, and you know, you'll have had people sort of asking you quite frequently how you're getting on. At university it's a bit different, because at university, if we don't hear from you, we just expect that you're getting on all right. So that's where it's kind of flipped. If we don't hear from you, we think, okay, yeah, that person's getting on fine. It's only if you tell us that you need a bit of help that we will know to support you. And that's for all sorts of reasons. You know, you'll be over 18, class as an adult, and you know, universities have so many more students than the sixth form or college. It wouldn't typically be possible to be able to ask everybody all the time how they're doing. Of course, we have mechanisms in place for that, for example, through your personal tutor and your academic team, your lecturers. But typically, we would expect you to come to us if you felt that you needed a bit of help. We have loads of opportunities for you to tell us that you need help. So we do regular polls. We've got all sorts of information on our online pages. But we would just encourage you to say, you know, at any point through the academic year, if you feel like you need a hand with anything, just ask. Like I've already said, you're in charge of your own routines and your own engagement. So again, a little bit different to that college or sixth form environment, if that's where you've come from. You know, typically if you sort of miss some classes at sixth form or college, you know, you'd have somebody calling you up, or calling a parent or a carer or guardian up, you know, asking where you were. Again, that's very different to university. You know, you want to be here, so we expect you to be at classes. But again, you know, if you don't feel that you can engage for whatever reason, tell us, and then that way we can help you out with whatever it is that you're going through. And like I said, if we don't hear from you, we won't know that you need support. So take home message, part of self-care is really asking for support when you need it, and not to feel ashamed in any which way. We all need help at some point, and really important that before you come to university, you remember that. And through that transition period, if times do get a little bit tough, you remember to ask for help. So I mentioned a bit about support here at Middlesex. So if you would like to, in your own time, have a bit of a look at what we have, if you go to UniHub, which is our sort of student-facing website, you'll find all of the support that we have in detail, and I'll just go through a few of the resources today. So we have what we call a Wellbeing Toolkit. And a Wellbeing Toolkit is basically a collection of resources and information unique to you, which you can draw upon at any time to look after yourself. And so what we've been talking about today is really a Wellbeing Toolkit. So maybe you've thought of a couple of things today that you're going to do differently, or you're going to change about your routines for your self-care. That can form part of your Wellbeing Toolkit. And then if and when times get a little bit tougher, you draw on the resources and the skills and the information in your Wellbeing Toolkit to look after yourself. I already mentioned that we have the Fika app, which is a fantastic mental fitness app, which would be exclusively free for you as a Middlesex student. We also have a platform called Togetherall, which is an online support platform available worldwide, 24 hours a day. And there's all sorts of self-help sort of resources and quizzes and courses on there. There is a community platform which is moderated by mental health professionals, so it's a really safe place to talk to other people about how they're feeling. If you've got something you'd like to talk about, you can know that you're doing it in a safe space. And I mentioned a few of our support services already. We have lots and lots of support service teams ready to step in and support you with anything affecting your life through your time at university. And I don't say that lightly. You know, we have teams covering really everything that could could get in the way of you doing well and enjoying your time at university. And really, the support services aren't only there for you if you're in trouble or if you feel that you need extra support. For example, we have a disability and dyslexia service, which is available for any student with a long-term health condition, be that physical health or mental health. And if you have a physical health condition, really important to get in touch with the team, again, before you come to university, so that you can get your support in place, get everything set up so that you can start university with everything already in place and sorted out for you. So after session today, I'd encourage you just to have a look at UniHub and just make sure that you've got everything in place, you know what the teams are, and then that way, if you ever do need us, you know exactly who you need to contact. And I thought I'd just do a little focus in on counselling and mental health, as we've been talking a little bit today about wellbeing and settling in. So we have a counselling mental health team made up of mental health professionals. They're all accredited professionals with the relevant professional bodies, and you can refer yourself to counselling at any time you feel that it is needed. So again, slightly different if you come from a college or a sixth form environment where maybe you would have had to go through a teacher or through somebody at that environment. At university, it's completely confidential, so you can refer yourself for support and nobody else need know. Of course, you're welcome to tell who you want. If your academic team, if you're close to them, if you wanted to tell them, of course you could, but there's no requirement. So you can refer yourself for ongoing support, for ongoing counselling. We also have an option of a callback service with the counselling mental health team, where you can basically speak with a member of the team within 2 working days. It's about 48 business hours. So that's a really great option if maybe you're just having a bit of a bad day or a bit of a bad week and you really just need to speak to somebody a little bit sooner. We do have that option. So having a bit of a think about what instances these services could be helpful. Well, like I said, we have services to support you really with anything that could happen in your life and in your time at university. So we have a whole career guidance support service. So if you are looking for part-time work or if you're looking to polish your CV, you can put yourself in touch with that team. I've mentioned the disability and dyslexia team if you have any kind of long-term condition. Obviously, counselling mental health if you need a helping hand with your mental health at any time. And then we've got all sorts of other teams who can help you with sort of the general admin tasks of being at university, study support, obviously sports societies, we've got the Students' Union. So really every sort of scenario that may crop up, we feel we've got you covered and we'll be here to help you along the way. And then a final point actually on counselling mental health and support services in general at university, which again is a bit different to college or sixth form if that's the environment you come from. Services at university are confidential, and sometimes worry about confidentiality can put students off from contacting teams like counselling mental health. You may be worried that something you say in confidence to the team may get back to your academic team or somebody else within the university or a family member. It's not the case. Every service operates within a confidentiality agreement, so only with your agreement would they talk to anybody else. The only time that would change is if you were in direct risk of harm or somebody else was at direct risk of harm. But aside from that, everything is completely confidential. So please don't let that sort of be a worry if you are considering contacting one of these teams before starting university. So I just wanted to finish, I see I've got a spelling error there on something, on thinking about something that you're going to do differently after today's session to better prepare yourself for university. So like I said at the beginning, I really don't want this session to be one where you come along and you sit here and you think, yeah, that sounds great, Vanessa, and then you go away and you forget about it. I really want you to think about what you can do differently after today's session to better prepare yourself for that transition and that change period and how you can be more resilient. I've also got my email address there at the bottom, so just wellbeing@mdx.ac.uk. So if you've got any questions that we haven't answered today, feel free to drop me an email at any time. But what I'm going to do now is head back to Menti, and I'd ask you just to pop in some of those thoughts once the screen loads. So something you're going to do differently after today's session to better prepare you for university. I can see my connection's dropped again, so I'm just going to reload that. And this is just something that I'd like you to engage with now over the next few minutes, just to get a sense check of what you're thinking that you're going to do a little bit differently to better prepare yourself for coming to university, and how you can look after yourself. Because that's the goal here, really, is for you to leave the session and have a bit of a better understanding about what to expect when you come to university, and to be able to actually put something in place. So thinking back to that action plan that we talked about a little bit earlier on. So I'm actually going to head out now. I've got another commitment I need to get to. So I'm going to hand over to Jack, my colleague who's on the call, who's just going to monitor as some of your responses come in, and maybe read some of those out. And again, we'll be able to share all of this after the session today. So I will leave my screen up and I will hand over to Jack just to keep an eye on these as they come through. And Jack will be able to guide you through the last couple of minutes of the presentation. So thank you everybody for coming along, and hopefully you found this useful. As I say, any questions, any queries, anything you're not sure about, please drop me an email afterwards. It's just wellbeing@mdx.ac.uk. Okay, over to you then, Jack. Bye everyone.
Thanks, Vanessa. As Vanessa said, guys, we'll give it another few minutes if anyone wanted to submit any more points or any more questions like that, and I'll try my best to answer those. And if not, remember the email is wellbeing@mdx.ac.uk. Feel free to ping any questions that have come following this over to Vanessa as well. A couple of great points have come in about getting a proper sleep routine and building a healthy physical fitness. Those are two really key things. And I think people often find when they get to university, they fall out of looking after their physical fitness. They get sort of overwhelmed with the social side and stop taking care of themselves. So if you can get into that routine before coming to university and maintain that throughout your sort of first term and first year, it's a really good place to begin with your well-being. Being kinder to yourself as well is one thing that people often forget. People can be quite harsh on themselves, especially when it comes to sort of exam period and times like that, when they know they're meant to be revising or maybe they've got deadlines to work towards. But remembering to sort of accept the little wins, appreciate the little wins, and be kind to yourself as you go forward. Perfect, guys. Well, if there's no more questions or points, we'll be able to leave it there. I'd just like to thank you all for coming and joining us at the session today. We hope you found it beneficial. Hope you all learned something from it. As I said, if you did have any follow-up questions at all, please email them over to wellbeing@mdx.ac.uk, and Vanessa will get back to you at some point later on in the week. Thank you again for attending, and wherever you end up studying, good luck with the studying itself. And I hope you've all taken something away that you'll be able to use once you begin your studying. Thanks a lot. Bye.